Welcome to the meeting of Assembly Committee on Education for the 2023 legislative session. Secretary, will you please call roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblyman Koenig.
Here.
Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Mosca.
Here.
Assemblywoman Taylor.
Present.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
I am here. Okay, so we do have a quorum. We're not missing anyone, right? Oh, okay. Okay, just a reminder to turn off your devices or put them on silence. Welcome to everyone. We have a few people here. Doesn't look like we have anyone in Vegas, but anyone who is watching online. If you wish to testify, we're hearing one bill today. Please sign at the table by the door. Provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying, please turn on your microphone. Clearly state and spell your name, any affiliation for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you're done speaking. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting. We might not always agree with each other, but that doesn't mean we can't be nice. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please don't view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. Finally, please note that bill testimony will be limited to 20-minute windows. It is deadline week. We'll take 20 minutes of support, followed by 20 minutes of opposition, 20 minutes of neutral. With that said, let's get started. We're going to start with the work session. The agenda was updated, so the items are correct that we will be hearing on work session. After we do our work session, we'll hear the bill and possibly take action on that bill, Assembly Bill 282. So let's start with our work session. It is not customary for committee to take testimony or otherwise rehear bills during work session. However, we may invite a witness to come forward for clarifications or questions during our consideration of a measure. We will be hearing 12 bills on work session today. There's 15. I was thinking that seemed, there's 15. So possibly 16, and I just wrote that to someone. So we will start. We're starting with AB 372. Wait, well, you wrote 782 here. All right, 182. We'll start with 182. Let's just keep it in order, okay?
Just pick one chair with every word.
All right. Please, Alex. Ms. Drozdoff.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Drozdoff, Committee Policy Analyst for the record. As nonpartisan staff, I can neither support nor oppose any measure that comes before the committee. The first bill on work session is Assembly Bill 182, which revises provisions governing educational personnel. The committee heard this bill on March 28th. Assembly Bill 182 makes several changes related to licensing for education, including requiring a baccalaureate degree to obtain certain licenses for teachers and other educational personnel, and allowing for the issuance of an endorsement or license to a person to serve as a substitute teacher in certain circumstances. The bill also makes specifications concerning teacher limitations for a person with endorsements in a field of specialization relating to career and technical education. Finally, it adds certain degree requirements prior to participating in an alternative route to licensure program, and it adds a license to serve as a substitute teacher to the kinds of licenses for teachers and other educational personnel. Assemblywoman Miller proposed an amendment to exclude the holder of a special license, issued as described in NRS 391.031, from the requirement to hold a baccalaureate degree. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. And with that, members, are there any questions? Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to amend and do pass. So moved by Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Do I have a second? Second from Assemblywoman Anderson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. If you could raise your hand if you were a nay. We've got Assemblywoman Torres, Assemblywoman Hanson, Assemblyman Koenig, sorry. Assembly Member, I'm going to start saying, Hardy are the noes. Did you have your arm up? No, he didn't do it. All right, so with that, the motion passes. And I will assign that to Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Okay. Next, we have Assembly Bill 226.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 226, which revises provisions governing tuition for certain students. The committee heard this bill on March 28th. Assembly Bill 226 prohibits the Board of Regents from assessing tuition charges against a student who successfully completed the high school equivalency assessment and from denying a tuition exemption to a student on the sole basis that the student or their family is not lawfully present in the United States if certain circumstances are met. And she submitted an amendment revising the language concerning tuition exemptions for certain students to better align with and address federal requirements related to in-state tuition for certain students. The amendment also provides that a student who takes certain high school equivalency exams be exempted from non-resident tuition and recommends limiting this expansion by requiring that it apply to students who successfully complete such an exam in Nevada. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. And with that, members, any questions? Seeing none, I will take a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Mosca has made the motion. Do I have a second? Who would that come from? As Torres. Assemblywoman Torres has seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion passes unanimously, and I will, of course, give that floor statement to Assemblyman De Silva. Next, we have Assembly Bill 228.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill in work session is Assembly Bill 228, which revises provisions governing required courses in high school. The committee heard this bill on March 30th. Assembly Bill 228 increases the required high school units of social studies credits from 3 to 4 and outlines those specific credits. It also outlines certain obligations of the State Board of Education concerning the requirements to receive a standard high school diploma. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch submitted an amendment making certain date changes within the bill and adding Assemblywoman Thomas as a co-sponsor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. And with that, any questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass.
So moved.
Assemblywoman Anderson has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Thomas. Any discussions on the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. So I have 3 nays, I believe. I have Assemblywoman Torres, Assemblywoman Thomas, and myself as nay. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. My brain is a little fried. Assemblywoman, Vice Chair Taylor, and myself as nays, but motion does carry. So I will assign that, of course, to you, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Okay. Next, we have Assembly Bill 241.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill in work session is Assembly Bill 241, which revises provisions governing the education of pupils enrolled in a public high school. The committee heard this bill on March 30th. Assembly Bill 241 requires a public high school pupil to enroll in the courses and credits required by the State Board of Education to receive a college and career-ready high school diploma. The bill also outlines circumstances in which students are not required to enroll in such courses and credits, as well as certain implementation dates for the bill. Assemblywoman Mosca proposed an amendment that does the following. Establish the CCR diploma requirements in the bill language to ensure NDE can only establish different regulations upon approval of the Legislative Commission. Include transitory language that excludes a pupil enrolled in a school district located in a county whose population is less than 100,000 from being required to satisfy the bill's requirements until on or after July 1st, 2026. Establish that pupils in grade 9 will be enrolled in courses that align them with the CCR or honors track. In the first semester of grade 10, pupils will meet with a counselor, at which time they may opt out of these diploma tracks. And add Assembly members Bilbray Axelrod, Taylor, Anderson, De Silva, LaRue Hatch, Thomas, Torres, and Koenig, and Senators Doñate, Flores, Wynn, and Pazina as co-sponsors to the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. Are there any questions? Seeing that, I will entertain a motion to amend a new pass. Assemblyman De Silva has made the motion. Assemblywoman Hanson has seconded. Any questions or comments on the motion? Please, Assemblywoman Moscow.
Thank you, Chair, and I just wanted to thank this committee because all of these amendments came directly from the items in the hearing, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moscow, and I appreciate your diligence on working on this bill and making it even better. With that, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. And Assemblywoman Mosca, please have that floor statement. Next, we will move to Assembly Bill 245.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 245, which revises provisions governing education. The committee heard this bill on March 30th. Assembly Bill 245 makes various changes relating to sexual misconduct. It requires the Board of Trustees of each school district to enter into a memorandum of understanding with an organization that assists victims of sexual misconduct and outlines certain conditions for the MOU. It also adds certain provisions concerning the Office for a Safe and Respectful Learning Environment and ENCHE related to sexual misconduct. Finally, the bill abolishes the existing task force on sexual misconduct at institutions of higher education, creates the Commission on Higher Education Campus Safety, transfers certain duties to the Commission, and prescribes the Commission's membership. Assemblywoman Torres submitted an amendment changing the term sexual misconduct to power-based violence, requiring certain actions of the Committee on Statewide School Safety, and requiring actions of school personnel and the statewide phone number relating to related to power-based violence. The amendment further makes certain requirements of the Commission, including its membership and duties, and of the Board of Regents. Finally, the amendment applies certain provisions to charter schools and removes all changes in Section 3 of the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Assembly Vice Chair Taylor, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually in conversation with Assemblywoman Torres, and I asked if she would add me as a co-sponsor on this, and I believe Assemblywoman Thomas, Mosca.
And all three of them.
Oh, Mosca, and it's a triad.
I would appreciate if we could do that as a floor amendment, I think, unless you're okay with that. You can fold it in? He's so good. All right, we'll do it. Okay, I just don't, we're at deadline, so we just got to
Thank you,
be
Madam Chair.
mindful. Don't want a bill to die because we were adding someone's name to it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman Torres.
Go ahead, Assemblywoman.
Thank you. And, I see Assemblyman MacArthur smiling over there. He's so happy to be a sponsor on this bill. We really appreciate your support. But I did want to make one clarification, too, based off the amendment language that I obviously proposed and is introduced, and a conversation we had during the hearing as well. I just want to remind the committee that the permissive language for ENCHE to create that climate survey and for the programming on sexual misconduct in Section 7 and 8 will be used in the bill as that to ensure that that's within the scope of our powers. Thank you.
Was that it? Okay, so, and we're adding an additional amendment, adding Vice Chair Taylor, Assemblywoman Thomas, Assemblywoman Moscow, and myself. Okay, good. That's what I thought. I was like, I think I'm on it. Okay, good. Can I go on twice? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, great. So any questions now on that motion? No. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carried. We didn't make the motion? Oh, God. You guys are
So
killing
moved.
me.
So moved.
I'm so sorry. For all of you watching at home, it's been a really long week. Okay, let's try this again. With that, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass.
So moved.
Vice Chair Taylor has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Thomas. We have the motion. Are there any questions on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Now it passes unanimously. Thank you. We will move on. Oh, and I'll send that to you, Assemblywoman Torres. Now, next we'll move on to Assembly Bill 264.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 264, which revises provisions governing attendance in public schools. The committee heard this bill on March 28th. Assembly Bill 264 makes various changes relating to school absences due to the observance of religious holidays. It outlines provisions related to such absences in terms of pupil eligibility for certain awards, school district reporting, attendance credits contingent upon coursework completion, and the duties of a parent or legal guardian related to notification regarding such absences. Assemblywoman Taylor submitted an amendment making certain changes related to the notification of such absences, capping the number of such absences at 5 days, clarifying that such absences shall not impact the Nevada State Performance Framework Absenteeism Index score, and clarifying language regarding award eligibility. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass. I think I got it. Assemblywoman Anderson, I'm putting you down as making the motion. Assemblyman De Silva, you have seconded the motion. Any questions on the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I will assign that floor statement to Vice Chair Taylor. Next is Assembly Bill 269.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 269, which revises provisions governing education. The committee heard this bill on April 11th. Assembly Bill 269 makes certain changes to evaluation cycles. It specifies that if a post-probationary teacher receives an evaluation designating overall performance as effective or highly effective for 2 consecutive evaluations, that teacher is given the option to request to participate in an observation cycle during the following school year, and outlines further related details to such an evaluation or observation cycle. The bill also adds certain provisions regarding coercion and consent related to evaluations. Assemblywoman Miller proposed an amendment removing student learning goals from teacher evaluations and outlining the provisions of this change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Any questions? Okay. With that, I would take a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Anderson has made the motion to amend and do pass. Second from Assemblywoman Torres. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I will give that floor statement to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you.
Next, we have Assembly Bill 279.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 279, which revises provisions governing the waiver of tuition and registration and certain fees for students who are children of certain veterans. The committee heard this bill on April 4th. Assembly Bill 279 prohibits the Board of Regents from assessing tuition charges against the child of a veteran who has been awarded the Purple Heart and requires the Board of Regents to waive certain fees for such a child. And she submitted an amendment clarifying the length of time that a child may use such a waiver. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, with that, I would take a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Mosca has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Torres. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Bill, a baby 279 passes unanimously, and I will I will assign that floor statement to you, Mr. De Silva. Assembly Bill 285.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 285, which revises provisions governing school safety and student behavior. The committee heard this bill on March 16th. Assembly Bill 285 removes the requirement that each school district establish a plan to provide for the restorative discipline of pupils, requiring instead that the Board of Trustees of each school district establish a plan of progressive discipline, which may include disciplinary practices based on restorative justice. Additionally, the bill removes the requirement that, in general, a public school must provide a plan of action based on restorative justice before suspending, expelling, or removing a pupil from a classroom, and outline certain conditions related to removing a pupil. Finally, AB 285 provides for the suspension, expulsion, and permanent expulsion of certain pupils less than 11 years old. Assemblywoman Taylor submitted an amendment applying bill provisions to university schools, adding certain definitions relating to progressive discipline, restorative practices, and assault to the bill, adding certain age parameters, and making certain changes to data reporting and collection. The amendment also makes certain changes relating to restorative justice and restorative practices, including changes relating to training, use, and certain plans made using such techniques. Finally, the amendment makes certain changes to the duties of a school district superintendent, parent conferences, consideration of individualized educational plan needs, a plan for reinstatement of certain students, and an appeals process for disciplinary actions. And Assemblywoman Taylor proposed an amendment adding Assembly members Hanson and Bilbray Axelrod as primary sponsors to the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Questions? You have a question on your bill?
No, I don't have a question. I just
Comment?
just a comment.
Let's do that after the
After,
motion.
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any questions? That would be funny if you had a question on your own bill that you're going to ask and put on the record, but who knows? Might be one of those days. Okay, so I don't see any questions, so with that, I would take a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Torres has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second. I'm going to give it to Assemblywoman Hanson. Now is the appropriate time to make a question or comment. Vice Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that make it clear to the committee that you may be missing Assembly Bill 194, which was submitted, primary sponsor from Assemblywoman Hanson. Well, you may have noticed we combined the bills, and I want to thank her for her support in that to make it a better bill and to strengthen them together. And just thank everyone who provided feedback and input so we can get to where we are today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I will be a strong no on this bill. My reasons for it is that no child in the state of Nevada should be a throwaway. And this bill, with its expulsion of children, would make it so that we have throwaway children. Nowhere in this bill does it give us a reentry plan on getting kids back into school so that we can teach them how to behave and how to learn and exercise their right as citizens of the state of Nevada and of the United States of America.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and I know you're quite passionate about that, and I appreciate that, and I'm wearing Tyrone's pin today to remind myself, but I did want to point out in the amendment, there is a plan for reinstatement. It says a plan for reinstatement must be included. So we are addressing that issue. I appreciate your passion. It looks like you want to make another comment, please.
Yes, ma'am, it's not in here. It does not give us a direction. And with CCSD not having direction, these kids will be expelled, and we know they will be BIPOC children, especially in my district. We know that there are people among us that do not believe that children of color deserve to be in school.
And I just wanted to put on the record, Mr. Killian, if you would discuss that specific aspect that was addressed in the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So on page 3 of the proposed amendment in the work session document, the second row up from the bottom, this is detailing the things that must be included in a restorative justice plan of action, and the final item on that list is a plan for reinstatement of a student who was expelled after the successful completion of certain steps. There would obviously be additional detail added for that by the school districts, but the bill does require that their plan of action include that plan of reinstatement for a student who has been expelled.
We have a couple comments, but I did want to say on the record that that was my concern too. Kids are kids. I don't care if they're black, brown, white, yellow, whatever. They're kids, and they should have an option to be reinstated. We do not want to throw these kids away. That we do not want to throw Nevada's kids away. So with that, I will go to Assemblywoman Hanson and then Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee, for the work on this. I really want to thank Assemblywoman Taylor and Assemblywoman Torres that there's been a lot of collaboration. I'm more than glad to have these bills married, and I think I can speak for all of us. We are here because we love kids. We want to do what's best for kids. And I can assure you I would never be involved with a bill that would throw away children. So we are all in support of a reinstatement plan as spelled out in the amendment. And we worked with those who were in opposition during the original hearing, and I think we have reflected that in the amendments. But we will continue to have conversations. We are open to those if we've missed something, but we need to establish some equilibrium in the classroom and safety to our teachers and to our students, but still watching and trying to protect kids from we want them to have a path back when that's possible. So thank you again for all the time and effort that everybody has put into this.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair. And I also want to commend the sponsor for working together on this piece of legislation. We have met at this point for hours and hours so that we could come to a piece of legislation that makes sense for Nevada teachers, makes sense for Nevada students. And I think that this piece of legislation does exactly that. I do want to note to the committee too, and to members of the public, some of the language that has gone in to address some of those concerns, specifically regarding making sure that there was language about reentry, which has already been noted, but then also ensuring that this also ties more to social emotional learning and the emotional health of our students. And so one of the pieces of this legislation that I think makes this legislation so monumental is it will require that once a student has been suspended or expelled, the restorative justice plan would be created. That's not saying that you have to require that plan to be created before you can suspend or expel, but saying now that you have done this, we have to think about how we're going to make sure that this student is getting the services that they need. That includes determining whether or not that student needs an IEP. That includes determining whether or not that student needs wraparound services. That also includes, whether or not that student needs additional family support or interventions on their campus. And these are supports that are often already provided by that school. And so I think that this is really going to ensure that students that are disproportionately impacted by school discipline, that are disproportionately suspended and expelled, get access to the services that our schools have to offer. And so for me, this piece of legislation is going to be really key to keeping our students in the classroom. And then once they are given time out of the classroom, that they get the support and the services that they need and that they deserve. So thank you so much.
Just one more, Chair. Just one more.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you. When I look at this amendment and I look at establishes the age of 6 and above for expulsion, 6 and above, 6 years old, they don't even know how to write their name, and you're ready to take them out of class. And then you say, oh, well, once they're out of class, then we'll give them those wraparound services. No, that's not the answer. So again, no, emphatically no.
Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to put on the record that I was a no during the hearing, but because of the amendment that has the quarterly data collected by each school and district, that I will vote it out of the committee today, but want to put it on the record that the purpose of that is that we can see by each quarter what is happening in our schools, in our school district. So if there is disproportionality, it is on each of us to be watching and making sure that we are acting on that in real time. But I do thank the sponsor for making sure that was added in.
Thank you for that, Assemblywoman. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass. Did I already do that? Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because last time I didn't. Okay, so all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Nay. And raise your hand if you're a nay. Assemblywoman Thomas is a nay. Motion carries. And I will assign that floor statement to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Next, we have Assembly Bill 296.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 296, which revises provisions governing instructional time in public schools. The committee heard this bill on April 6th. Assembly Bill 296 prohibits the use of more than 2% of the total number of annual attendance minutes required for a pupil for conducting or preparing an examination or assessment, and outlines certain exceptions to this prohibition. It also outlines certain provisions related to the count of pupils for apportionment purposes regarding instructional time and provides further details concerning such time. Assemblyman De Silva submitted an amendment adding certain test exemptions, removing the apportionment penalty, outlining certain tracking provisions, defining assessment, and clarifying language concerning instructional time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I would take a motion to amend and do pass. Vice Chair has made the motion, second by Assemblywoman Torres. Any discussion on the motion? Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And I also wanted to thank the sponsor because I told him literally, I think, 2 hours ago, about some items that had been brought up to me for concerns. And I believe 2 of the items have already been addressed now with this amendment, so I greatly appreciate the amendment being in there. However, I will be a no at this time for the main reason that I'm concerned about the amount of work of tracking this to be placed onto teachers and administrators' shoulders. And so I look forward to being able to work with you about possibly bringing forward some other language about that, just because I am very concerned about it being just one more thing on educators' shoulders. And I don't want the data to be based upon who had the training correctly and who didn't have the training correctly. So at this time, I will be a no, but I look forward to being able to bring forward an amendment by working with the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Any other discussion? Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to thank Assemblyman De Silva. I had some concerns that not wanting recess to be hurt by any of this, and he reflected that in the amendment. So thank you so much for that, and I will be able to be yes at this time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put on the record, I will be a yes out of committee. I'm worried about when it comes to making sure that different schools have different tests and that there's equitable access. But the sponsor and I have been in multiple discussions about what is the state role versus the local role. But I will be watching for that when and if it goes through. Thank you.
Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. I echo some similar concerns about teacher time, but I've talked to the sponsor and he's committed to working on that amendment to make sure this is not put on our teachers. And so with that, I will be a yes, but I'll continue to work with him.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for your input. Like I said during the actual presentation of this bill, this is not a perfect bill, but we're working on addressing several of these issues. We did specifically try to add language that address the burdens that we're going to be put on reporting vis-a-vis the teachers themselves. That was a little bit too late, I know, because of the deadline that the chair put upon us. So that will be addressed and will be part of this this bill moving forward. And I do want to thank you all for your other considerations, and we will be implementing most of this into our bill as we move forward. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues.
Any other comments? Okay, then all in favor say, oh wait, I did take a motion. Oh my gosh. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
We have one nay from Assemblywoman Anderson. Motion carries. And I will give that floor statement to you, Mr. De Silva. Next, we will go to Assembly Bill 323.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 323, which revises provisions relating to education. The committee heard this bill on April 4th. Assembly Bill 323 addresses various teacher recruitment measures. It requires the state superintendent to develop a strategic plan in this regard. It also outlines certain requirements for the Commission on Professional Standards in Education to adopt regulations relating to competency test requirements, establish standards for professional development training, and adopt certain regulations concerning provisional licensing. The bill also authorizes a school district to compensate an assigned student for certain training purposes. Finally, the bill creates a permanent incentivizing pathways to teaching program, outlines certain provisions concerning the program, and outlines certain authorization and eligibility requirements for certain scholarships and stipends related to teacher preparation. Assemblywoman Torres submitted an amendment that makes changes relating to the transcript translation process, prescribes the study of certain licensing tests, and makes certain inclusions of alternative route to licensure teachers, as well as charter schools and university schools. It also adds certain requirements relating to professional development on family engagement and multicultural studies, and adds certain development and presentation requirements for a plan that expands awareness and eliminates barriers for the teacher pathway scholarship programs. Finally, the bill removes sections 2, 9, and 10. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. Any questions, members? Seeing none, I will take a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Mosca has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Anderson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Assemblyman MacArthur, you're a co-sponsor on the bill, but you're going to vote against it? I mean, it tracks for you. You're really an A on your own bill? He's reserving his right to change his mind back to the way it used to be. God love you. God love you. Okay, so with that, even though one of the sponsors voted no, MacArthur, it still passes. So congratulations to both of you. And I will, who should I assign it to him? Assemblywoman Torres. I'll give it to you, Assemblywoman Torres. Oh my God, is it Friday yet? Next, we will go to Assembly Bill 330.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 330, which revises provisions governing education. The committee heard this bill on March 23rd. Assembly Bill 330 makes various changes to pupil discipline and behavior. The bill removes the reference to a statewide framework for restorative justice, outlines certain data reporting requirements, and outlines certain duties of the state superintendent and school principals related to pupil discipline. It also puts in place certain conditions relating to removing a pupil from the classroom and outlines provisions relating to certain removals, such as suspensions, significant suspensions, expulsions, and permanent expulsions. Furthermore, the bill makes certain changes relating to the discipline for homeless pupils and applies bill provisions to charter schools and university schools. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod submitted an amendment restoring provisions concerning the statewide framework for restorative justice, adding certain age parameters to the bill, and adding certain definitions relating to progressive discipline, restorative justice, and assault to the bill. The amendment also removes and restores certain language relating to homeless pupils, removes certain authorizations related to principal actions, and removes certain language concerning disciplinary actions. Finally, it adds certain language from regulation into statute. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Drozdoff. Any questions on the bill? Members? No? With that, I would take Oh, you have a question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank
A
you.
comment or question?
Question.
Okay.
And this is just a clarifying question on the amendment from 5B. I'm just clarifying that language, 5A and B, I think it is, because it's that we separated them out. But just making sure that it's permissive language for suspension, expulsion, or permanent expulsion, correct? So it would look similar, I imagine, then to what AB 194's language was on that.
Can you repeat your question? That section is defining those terms.
I apologize, I'm looking at the wrong part. It would be 8 of the amendment, so removing the first occurrence language. Additionally, the amendment seeks to separate them out and then add permissive language to allow the principal to make exception to the procedures. So would it be just that they would be able to suspend, expel, and then permanently expel? Or how would that look?
In section 8, the removal of the term for first occurrence, what we're going for in that is that, so it would, one example was like an illegal substance, sort of giving the principal the option, if someone comes and, accidentally brought a gummy from home, that's very different than someone with going out and selling drugs. So we were giving that levity.
Thank you. That clarifies. I just want it very clear for the record. So it's just that permissive ability now for principals to do that as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For clarification purposes, number 2 on the amendment mentions permanently expelled, and 285 that we just approved said that basically students always have a way back. How do those work together? Or does this permanently expelled, does it not really mean permanent?
That is actually specifically for the age that a child under 6 in this bill, in this language, cannot be permanently expelled. And that was specific to that section. Mr. Killian, did you want to add? Is that a fair? He's saying yes. So it was specific to the children of that age. They cannot be permanently expelled.
Right, and no, thank you, Madam Chair. I should have asked that question a little better. Because that implies that anyone over 6 then can be permanently expelled, whereas in AB 285, right. So do we not worry about how they coexist? She said 1 minute.
1 minute recess. Okay, we're back. So, in the proposed language of this bill, it was just addressed that under 6 could not be permanently expelled. I do, however, believe that it is the governor's intent that we are not giving up on any kid in Nevada either, and so we will continue to have discussions about those reentry programs. But currently in the bill, that was the only thing that was addressed, was that under 6. So, but in good faith, we will. I'm nodding over at someone from the governor's office. We'll continue to talk about those reentry programs because I like I said, I believe that's the intent of the bill. Any other? What? Any other comments? Any other questions? Do we have questions on the bill? Okay. Any other questions? I didn't take a motion.
I'll entertain a motion to amend it to pass.
You'll entertain it? Or you'll offer it?
I'll offer a motion.
She's going to entertain us. Assemblywoman Torres has made the motion to amend and do pass. Do I have a second? Assemblyman De Silva has seconded it. Now, Assemblywoman Thomas, I know you have a comment.
Yes, I do. In this bill, again, I will be a hard no. When I look at significant suspensions, expulsions, and permanent expulsions, and then the bill does not address, as far as I'm concerned, it gives a pass to under 6. It doesn't, it mentions homeless children, but it doesn't mention disabled children, ISP kids. I mean, this is unbelievable to me that we in the United States of America, in the state of Nevada, are willing to put our children through this garbage when we have the money and the willpower and we can have kids rehabilitate instead of waiting to them to get into prison to rehabilitate them. This is unbelievable. And bar it be the governor's bill, I don't give a sugar. I am upset that we will do something like this to our children in the state of Nevada.
Thank you. Any other comments? Assemblywoman Moscow.
I'll be a yes at a committee with reserving right to change on the floor. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I know that I had proposed a number of recommendations to this piece of legislation. I appreciate the Chair and the sponsor for working with me so that I could get to a place where I'm content with passing this language, and I look forward to continuing to pass legislation that's going to keep our kids safe, while also prioritizing ensuring our students have access to the resources that they need on our school campuses. Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to concur with the whole idea being providing the opportunities for all students to have an opportunity to come back and for the supports to be around them. I can support this bill because we just passed 285. I think they work in concert. In 285, there was a discussion about students with IEPs, there was a discussion about the wraparound services, and about the social emotional learning, and about the training that's required, those supports that will be necessary to make sure that that the whole idea is to keep children on the path where they can continue to move forward while keeping schools safe. So I feel comfortable passing AB 330, knowing there's some other conversations to close the door on permanent expulsion. I don't think anybody wants that because we've passed 285.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I believe that is the feeling, that they would very much work in concert with each other. So with that, I will say all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Assemblywoman Thomas is a nay. Motion carries. And I will take that floor statement. Okay. Next, we will move on to Assembly Bill 339.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 339, which revises provisions governing accountability reports of public schools. The committee heard this bill on April 11th. Assembly Bill 339 adds requirements for certain annual accountability reports on pupil achievement to include information on pupils who have accrued 10 or more absences within the school year, and pupils who received at least 4 weeks of instruction in a core academic subject by someone other than a certified teacher, unless certain prohibitions relating to the data apply. Additionally, this information should be disaggregated by gender and other groups identified in the statewide system of accountability for public schools. Assembly members Miller and Torres proposed an amendment indicating that the 4 weeks of instruction by a person other than a certified teacher, as referenced in the bill, be specified as 4 consecutive weeks that occur any time during that school year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to amend and do pass. Assemblywoman Anderson has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Torres. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I will give that floor statement to Assemblywoman Thomas. Next we have Assembly Bill 357.
Thank you, Chair. The next bill on work session is Assembly Bill 357, which revises provisions governing sexual education in public schools. The committee heard this bill on April 11th. Assembly Bill 357 requires the Board of Trustees of a school district to establish and periodically revise a course or course unit of evidence-based factual instruction in sexuality education, and establishes certain conditions of the course, including conditions concerning the course instructor. It also makes certain changes to the advisory committee relating to such a course. Additionally, AB 357 provides certain conditions concerning parental or guardian notification and abilities, including the ability for a parent or guardian to refuse authorization for a pupil to attend the course or certain lessons. Furthermore, the bill requires that the Board of Trustees annually prepare and submit a report to certain bodies concerning the course. Finally, it outlines certain standards for instruction in health relating to sexuality education. No amendments were proposed for this measure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? With that, I would take a motion to do pass. Assemblywoman Anderson has made the motion. Second by Assemblywoman Torres. Any discussion on the motion? MacArthur, did you want to be added as a co-sponsor? Oh, just kidding. Okay, with all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Nay. Raise your hands, please. I think I know. We have Hardy, MacArthur, Dr. Sex Ed's voting against sex ed. That's Hanson. She called herself that, not me. And Mr. Koenig, Assemblyman Koenig, knows. With that, motion carries, and I'm going to take that one as well. Assembly Bill 372.
Thank you, Chair. The last bill on work session is Assembly Bill 372, which revises provisions relating to higher education. The committee heard this bill on April 4th. Assembly Bill 372 authorizes the Board of Regents to enter into an agreement with a nonprofit organization, community entity, or governmental agency to jointly provide families and caretakers with training, workshops, and resources designed to facilitate family engagement in early childhood education. The bill further outlines certain provisions relating to such agreements. No amendments were proposed for this measure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, I will take a motion to do pass. Assemblywoman Torres has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Assemblywoman Anderson. Any questions or comments? Okay, with that, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I will give that floor statement to Assemblyman MacArthur. All right, good job, guys. Okay, with that, we will close our work session and open our hearing for today. We'll now open the hearing on AB 282, This measure establishes provisions governing a subsidy for certain substitute teachers. To present this measure, we have Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Welcome to the most excellent Committee on Education, and please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Madam Chairwoman Bilbray Axelrod, and Co-Chairwoman Ms. Taylor, and all the members of the Education Committee. My name is Chandra Summers Armstrong, and I am the Assembly Representative for the fabulous, the wonderful, the excellent Assembly District 6. Y'all love all these words, so I'm just helping you out with some new ones for today. It is wonderful to see you all, and it is a pleasure and an honor to sit in front of you today to present to you Assembly Bill 282, which is requesting that school districts provide health insurance for their substitute teachers. Now, we'll start off with a little levity, but this is a serious, very serious issue. In Clark County alone, there are over 1,360 permanent openings in the school district alone. And those openings are being filled by about 4,000 substitutes, 1/5 of which is about 800 subs, are long-term subs. Without these folks, we would have no one in our classrooms to teach our children. You will hear from my co-presenter, Attar Hesibullah, who's the executive director of the Nevada ACLU, that these substitutes make somewhere around $120 on average a day. Now, I'm not a mathematician. I always have to have a calculator or Excel, who's my best friend, to help me figure things out. But I can tell you just on a glance that that is not enough money for anyone, even if you are working every day, to afford rent, groceries, and health insurance. Now, some folks might say, well, they can buy it on the exchange. I would challenge you to go to the health exchange and see how much it would cost for an individual or an individual with a family, and see if you can make that math work. So I appreciate your attention. I'm going to turn this presentation over to Mr. Hesibullah, and he will take you through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Thank you to the members of the committee. For the record, Attar Hesibullah, first name spelled Athar, last name spelled Haseebullah. I'm the executive director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Nevada, also a civil rights lawyer by background. We're going to begin this presentation today, and I understand it's a committee deadline, but we have a very short video that was prepared that'll kind of contextualize some of what's going on. Hopefully the audio works. If not, it will. Tech support is on their way to assist. Thank you very much.
Amazing tech support.
Yes. Having an issue loading for some reason. Let me try this again. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on with the video. It's on Nellis. I'll go ahead and share the highlights, though. What you would hear in that video, if it were to play, and for anybody that's tuning in, is you'd be able to actually hear from a couple long-term substitute educators about their experiences. And one of the biggest challenges we're running into statewide right now, obviously, is teacher shortages. Something that continues to exist statewide, though, is that our substitute educators are not afforded basic dignity, basic decency. These are the same educators that fill classrooms. And they're not entitled to any benefits. In fact, many districts statewide actually have specifications in place that a long-term substitute teacher, a short-term substitute teacher, any substitute teacher will be entitled to no benefits. That includes health insurance coverage. So what do we have? We have individuals who are stuck filling the gaps day in and day out, teaching our kids, and no support. These individuals don't always even have the ability to be in a position where they're able to bargain. There's no bargaining unit that represents substitute educators as of right now because the cost, the time equity, and the challenges associated with doing so are sometimes too much. These folks are making $120 a day and being taken advantage of. It's critical that we get them some level of support in place. We continue to talk about a teacher shortage overall, and we focus on not retaining our current licensed teachers. We focus on not being able to recruit new teachers. And these are true. And what's also true simultaneously is that we are running into a substitute teacher shortage as well. And that includes long-term subs. That is the fire that's not being put out. It's the fire that nobody is talking about, but it's a fire that's going to impact the state for years to come if we don't figure out ways to address it right now. What this bill would do, AB 282, would provide a subsidy to provide support for our long-term educators. We dubbed this the Health Insurance for Long-Term Substitute Teachers Act, HILSA, for that specific reason. What would it do? The very first thing it would do is it would define long-term substitute. Now, there is an amendment that was put in Nellis. We've shared that with most of the stakeholders involved here. And what that would do is make the definition clear statewide. We use the most stringent definition of what a long-term substitute teacher is here because it's important that they get something. Every substitute teacher we've spoken to has told us the same thing, that regardless of what the day count is, they continue to run, thank you, they continue to run into the same challenges in that they don't have the basic ability to afford health insurance. They don't have the basic ability to functionally live. And it's become too much and too burdensome, so they'd rather leave and go into a different position altogether. How can we justify as a society individuals being in a classroom for a prolonged period of time, not being afforded any dignity and forced to be on Nevada Medicaid? It makes no sense. So the bill would define long-term substitute. It would provide a monthly subsidy for long-term substitute teachers and up to 3 dependents exclusively for the purchase of health insurance. This isn't a general purpose subsidy, so regardless of what may be said or how things might be characterized, this is specific so that these individuals can purchase health insurance. It also ensures subsidies are utilized for the intended purposes involved. Again, as we mentioned, long-term substitutes work for lower pay, can be capped at $120 per day, and they receive no other benefits, despite oftentimes performing the work of permanent teachers. How did we define long-term substitute pursuant to this bill? Well, the proposed amendment that was uploaded in Nellis and what we've shared is that Section 6 specifically would state that a long-term substitute teacher means a substitute teacher endorsed pursuant to Chapter 391 of NRS or pursuant to Chapters 391 of NAC who's employed at any school district for 30 consecutive available instructional days within a single school year. So initially, there's district policies all over the place right now. Some are 10, some are 12. We've bumped it to 30 consecutive available instructional days. And the key word there is available, more than anything else. The reason why we say available is because we recognize there's sometimes a tendency by certain governments to make certain days unavailable, to make sure that those days that requirement can't be met. The next thing that this would do, and again, this definition is only for the purposes of determining subsidy eligibility here, so it's very, very limited. The current amount of substitutes we have is staggering. So before I jump into the other language, I wanted to make sure I provided that definition of the 30 consecutive days, and the other criteria for eligibility I'll share momentarily. But here's the current substitute totals by district. We've also uploaded a set of exhibits into Nellis, including health insurance average costs, but also public records request responses from all of the districts that are listed here on the screen. That is a painstaking process to be able to get this information, as you all might imagine. But this is the total we have statewide. These are the current number of subs we have. Here's our current teacher shortage. That's a staggering amount. And we go to long-term subs falling under the definition of 30 consecutive days, 30 consecutive available instructional days. That's the total. That's a staggeringly high number. When we have over 700 long-term subs under that definition in CCSD alone. And then you add 100 plus in Washoe County, and these are all individuals, again, that are in these classrooms consistently, more than 30 days consecutively, no benefits. So when they get sick in a classroom, either they can go through a collection process or try to force themselves to get on Nevada Medicaid to have some level of support. Qualifications for a subsidy here pursuant to this bill. Again, you'd have to meet the definition of a long-term substitute educator, 30 consecutive available instructional days. You'd have to continue to teach 70% of the available instructional days each month. We've included that within the amendment as well. It'd also be such an element for a requirement that you'd have to make sure you didn't go more than 45 days without teaching a single day. We recognize there was concerns from some districts in that regard as well. We also included language specifically to state that you'd need to furnish proof of a health insurance purchase to a school district in order for you to maintain eligibility thereafter. So that language has been specified within the bill language as well. Additionally, there's a final caveat that a school district shall not prevent any substitute teacher for working the necessary number of days to qualify for the subsidy specified within the section solely for the purposes of precluding that ability. And that is a catch-all to make sure that you've hit day 29 and we've decided to make no days available so you can't get the subsidy. I heard some chuckles. Not sure if because folks could imagine that might actually be a case of reality here, but we are where we are. The subsidy would work in the following way. Each person that falls under this definition, each beneficiary, would be entitled to a minimum of $450 per month per beneficiary, and they'd be able to bring on also up to 3 dependents at the same rate, so that would be a maximum of $1,800 per month. Why $450? That's based on the average monthly cost of non-Medicare and Medicaid insurance plans in the state. Again, we included that information within the exhibits that are also on Nellis, so you can understand where the perspective comes from. It's not some random number we pulled out of the sky that 450 sounded good. This is the average rate that exists. And further proof of health insurance purchase would be required. Now, there's a couple other things I'll say to this issue before we open it up for questions. First and foremost, the concept right now and the reason why we took this issue on is not because this is at its core, the civil liberties issue of the day, but this is a civil rights issue, and it's a deep civil rights issue because the actions that are occurring with our substitute teachers statewide are predatory. This is a predatory process. These folks have been left out to dry. There is nobody pleading their story right now. There's only a couple bills up at session right now to be able to address this, and our hope is that this can do 2 things. One, it can help stabilize that labor force within the substitute teacher universe, and 2, this might inspire some of the folks who are subs right now that are, especially our long-term subs, to enter into the pipeline to become a licensed educator. We recognize, and every educator we've spoken to is running into challenges, but the fact of the matter is these folks are facing challenges that are uncomprehendable at this point. The other thing that I'd share before I open it up for questions is you're going to hear feedback from school districts that are going to call this an unfunded mandate, right? I was a government lobbyist at one point. It's my favorite 2 words to throw out at a legislative hearing, unfunded mandate, because you end up getting referred somewhere. It's not an unfunded mandate. If you have licensed educators in place, these provisions won't apply because you won't have substitutes at this number. So it's not unfunded. You funded these positions for licensed educators over the course of time. And on average, the additional expenditure, the difference in salary could be between $20,000 and $30,000 per educator. So multiply that by the number of long-term subs we've shared. And the average amount of health insurance that's spent on a licensed educator, just for health insurance purposes alone from the data we received, was a little over $8,000 per year. And these folks don't get any of it. So in fact, what has happened is there has been budgeted actual numbers to include full licensed teachers, and there has been accrued savings as a result of predatory actions towards our long-term subs. So any notion that this is an unfunded mandate is simply untrue, unless this body knew that it was not funding an appropriate amount of educators or funding educators at that level, which this body didn't know. You've been funding the full amount of money for these educators, and they haven't been filling the vacancies. So where's that money going, right? We don't have an answer, but what we do know is that our long-term subs are not receiving any health insurance support whatsoever. They're going into classrooms, they're getting sick, and there is no benefit for them at the end of this. We had 2 subs that have come to us and told us in recent weeks that they ended up in the hospital. And they were afraid to go to the hospital because you're, at that point, choosing between the collections account you're going to get put into or trying to force yourself to work because you need to make that $120 a day to stay stable. This is not a perfect solution. It's not going to solve for the crisis as a whole. But not doing this at this point is, quite frankly, absurd, and we're hoping this body considers this and takes this up today. I recognize it might get referred to another committee. I'm happy to argue about unfunded mandates and accrued savings and budgeted actual numbers at a Ways and Means Committee hearing as well. No problem there. But again, we're going to end up hearing consistently unfunded mandate. It's been funded. It's not been used on these folks, and we really need to do something about that. Also, before we go into questions, we had No, it's a committee deadline day. We had 210 people sign the petition in support of this just in the last 24 hours alone. I told those individuals they did not need to call in. We're happy to do that for you all, should there be such a desire, but I figured it might not be the most prudent use of your time. There's also a series of support letters there, both from long-term substitute teachers who have shared their experiences, but also from other organizations that work in the education space and other spaces that want to see this come into fruition. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, did you want to make any other comments, or are you ready for questions?
No, ma'am, we are ready. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a number of questions. I'm going to just start out, and I get it. I totally get it. I'm just curious if, based on what you're saying about the amount, and I just kind of did, if you worked 9 months a year and you make 120, it's about little under 24,000. I used a calculator there too. But wouldn't they be eligible for subsidies through the ACA?
That's part of the purpose, is that, sorry, for the record, Tarhasi Bula, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. Thank you for correcting me, Assemblywoman. It's like we're back at work. We used to be coworkers, so it's full swing of things. So, right. Yes, that includes portions that might end up being subsidized, but the actual portion that's mentioned, we actually did a calculation based on that respective income level for what that purchase would be. And so generally those plans end up being significantly higher. So this is with the consideration that they are working during that time period. The other portion, which we did run into, is that these folks would work for about 9 months, and the way that they're paid is that they're normally paid the daily rate, so they're not paid over the summer. We have talked to a number of long-term substitute teachers about this, and one of the things that they mentioned to us is that they'll normally end up taking on other work over the summer that might be able to provide them the sort of difference. Hopefully we can expand this out in the future. There's a number of school districts across the country right now that are providing full health insurance benefits for those who are not even long-term subs, for all subs. And then when we go to the number of districts nationwide that are providing health insurance for long-term subs, it's even greater. This is but a subsidy, but it's a subsidy that goes a long way to help them get what they need specifically for the purpose of being able to address their medical needs.
Thank you for
Chair,
that.
if I could just,
Sure.
So I think it's been evident over the last couple of years with COVID, right, and illness, and we have these notices all the time about upper respiratory diseases and these things. Our children are germ carriers. I don't care how much we instruct them to wash their hands. They are germ carriers, and classrooms are an incubator for germs. And so we know that our children are, and these substitute teachers are exposed every day to germs and an environment that could get them sick. So those of us who have health insurance, we take it for granted often that you can just, call your doctor and get a prescription. That is not the case. And so I think that this is important for us to recognize from our positions, many of us of privilege, of having this type of insurance, that it is not available to them. And I'm sad, right, that the school district is on the list of having some of the most Medicaid receiving employees. And so I think that we need to take that into consideration.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we have a number of questions. We'll start with Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this, especially in the district that I represent. A lot, if not most of the long-term subs are BIPOC individuals who are from the community. So I really appreciate it. You actually answered my question about how many people, and you touched on my other question about what other states or districts. So I was wondering if you can just go into a little more depth or examples of what other districts are doing and how that relates to this model, or if we're doing it a little different.
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada, and I appreciate the question, Assemblywoman Mosca. It depends on the district, right? So when we look at most of these districts, they're actually providing comprehensive coverage in this way in terms of what I've mentioned before for their substitute educators or their long-term subs, especially these large districts. When we look at places like whether that's Houston Independent School District or Los Angeles Unified School District or the Portland Public Schools, long-term full-time subs are qualifying for full-on health insurance coverage. And then you go over to a couple other states, and what you'll end up seeing is kind of quite the same, that there's an even broader pool of health insurance coverage provided for their employees, whether that's in Duval County or in Dallas or a few of the other ones nationwide. Again, we're here right now for purposes of getting a subsidy because this has been an uphill battle. To get to a point where substitute educators have a voice to be able to push this narrative and have a bill before the legislature that's being heard, where they might end up with at least a modicum of dignity afforded to them so they can go out and purchase health insurance, is a significant step, right? The hope would be, moving forward, that they would have health insurance as well. That would be the ACLU's goal as a whole, right? And not have to utilize a subsidy to go out and purchase it. And sometimes we recognize the challenges there, but the exchange is available for that purpose. One other point I'll make that Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong commented on, when we're talking about Medicaid, and I had mentioned accrued savings and unfunded mandates. Is it an unfunded mandate if your employees are forced onto state coverage through Nevada Medicaid because you don't want to give them enough money to purchase health insurance, right? That's something that doesn't come up with an asterisk next to it. It's something, though, that we should take into account when we're doing this, because these are folks who, again, have been working full-time. There's no question, if you compare this to a full-time schedule, it's even more rigorous, the requirements put here, than an ordinary full-time schedule to qualify. 30 consecutive days isn't something that normally happens. You might be able to take a break. It's normally after your first month you're eligible. But that's not what's happened here, because we recognize it's an uphill battle. So from our vantage point, there should be universal support for this, unless someone's against private health insurance or they're against the concept of working almost indefinitely for next to nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this presentation. I do have a couple just like logistical questions and maybe points of clarification. I'm looking at section 1 sub 6 with the definition of long-term sub, and we did check the NACS and the NRS to see if there was any other definition of long-term substitute teacher, and there isn't, which is weird because it's also referred in other places in the NRS. But I do have a couple issues with the definition as is, because I just need to understand what the intent is, whether or not the intent, because my understanding of long-term sub as an educator is a long-term sub is an educator who's put into a classroom replacing an educator for a long period of time. But through my reading of this definition, it would just be a substitute teacher who's teaching for 15 or more consecutive days within a school year. So is it just any substitute teacher that's there? And if that's the case, I would really like us to change the word long-term sub out for a different word, because they have two different meanings. But
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Torres. For the record, Tatar Hasibullah, ACLU of Nevada. Actually, that language was specifically amended and put into the amendment with respect to the long-term definition, but I'll provide a couple other qualifying criteria, most important of which is that this is only for purposes of determining eligibility for the subsidy. So this cannot be utilized in other sections if there were to be other benefits given or something else of the sort. The reason why this language is specifically being utilized is for purposes of determining eligibility here. The requirements for determining that eligibility would be, again, 30 consecutive available instructional days, 70% of the available instructional days in the months thereafter. And really what that does is it provides that you're working the first 30-day period consecutively, 70% of the days thereafter, and you're in a district at that time. The reason why we can't specifically prescribe it to a specific classroom is because we recognize there's not only changing needs within districts, but they'll utilize long-term subs to move them around. You might be in a class for 2 months, and a month later you'll be in a separate class for the next 2 months, and going on and so forth. But what we don't want to happen is someone during that time period moves into a different classroom and then they're precluded from eligibility for subsidy purposes.
Thank you. So then based off that, I think we're really talking about full-time substitute teachers, right? So those are two different conversations, and I think that just helps with clarifying, and it might be helpful to kind of use that language just because in education, our use of a long-term sub is just so different, and I think what our intent is to ensure that it's available for full-time substitute teachers that are doing that job. I would like to strengthen the language used in the amendment. Amendment number 4, I'm taking a look at it, and it says that a school district shall not prevent the substitute teacher from working those days. And my understanding is, and actually schools are doing this right now, is that, you have a teacher that might be serving as like a paraprofessional role, and they get more pay if you've reached so many weeks in this paraprofessional role, and then they'll switch you into a day subbing so that you get less pay and so that you can't get that more pay. And office managers have that decision because that funding is coming at the discretion of the schools. I think the language needs to be clarified that a school district or school. Additionally, I would like to see language in there protecting paraprofessionals or when they're switching the duties of that assigned educator, that they would still be included in this, essentially.
For the record, Atara Boulay, CLU of Nevada. With respect to whether or not they're deemed long-term subs or full-term subs, happy to work through the language there. For us, main thing is that there's health insurance subsidies in place, regardless of the title. With respect to the second point in terms of Amendment 4, we specifically utilized this language because what we did not want to do was show up to a committee hearing like this or future committee hearings and include language. We initially had language that was related to good cause and recognize the litigious nature of what happens when we do things of that nature. But happy to work with you on making sure that language is modified. If we can tighten it anyway, we're happy to do that. But the main thing is we want to make sure that this gets across the aisle. It doesn't get held up for any arbitrary reason, because as it stands right now, again, these folks are operating without any benefits whatsoever. And so to the degree we can make a better bill, happy to do that. And very grateful to hear your words on this, and I'm sure the substitute teachers that are tuned in and watching this will be appreciative as well.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Koenig.
Thank you, Chair. So to appease Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod, at the end of when I'm done, I'll say a right. So I have a son-in-law. Well, first off, when I hear this, I put on my school board hat and back to the day when there was underfunded mandates, and I'm looking at, this is going to cost Las Vegas almost $17 million. It's going to cost Washoe a little under $3 million. It's going to cost Carson $700,000. I calculated it cost Churchill about $500,000. And so I'm thinking unfunded mandate. It's happened before. Sitting on the school board, all of a sudden you got to find in your budget this extra money. But I think you're a very good attorney because you kind of convinced me that they would have been paying benefits to these people if they, the ideal isn't to have a long-term sub in the class. The ideal is to have a teacher. And if you had the teacher like you wanted, you would be paying that teacher benefits. I have a son-in-law who is just finishing up his teaching degree, but he is teaching 8th grade English for the whole year. So he is a long-term sub. Him and my daughter are in the process of buying a house. They cannot use any of his income towards qualifying for a loan because he is a long-term sub. Subsequently, I had to co-sign and fill out 500 pages of financial stuff, and I'm really, really mad about the whole damn thing. But anyways, right?
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you. We all needed a giggle. Thank you. Right? We'll next go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, and I did need that little bit of a giggle. So I have 3 questions, but I'll try to make them quick. The first one has to do with why the decision in the amendment to change it from 15 to 30 days. Because if I were to take a look at the Clark County School District calendar for next year, and if day 1 of August 7th, there is somebody that is a long-term sub, or full-time sub, or whatever the phrase will be, they would not be able to be even eligible for this until September 19th. And then if I take a look at Washoe County School District, it would be August 14th that they would start. And again, that would be September 25th. So I'm wondering why the decision was made in the amendment to make it from 15 to 30 days. And then also, can a school district or a board of trustees make a decision to bring that back down to 30, or back down to 15, as is originally described in this bill?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Anderson. For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director of the ACLU of Nevada, the decision was made to bump it up to 30 days because we did have extensive conversations with stakeholders, and one of the things that kept coming up was that 15 days is too short of a period of time. You would never qualify for health insurance or any other benefit in another employment setting if you're only working 15 days. The standard form ends up being you work 30 days and you're eligible for it thereafter. We had to put in the available instructional days for that period of time because many times those days are not made available. And if those days are not made available, again, we run into challenges on the back end. To Assemblyman Koenig's point, one thing we recognized was the goal is not to have subs in place in classrooms, especially long-term subs. We want licensed educators there. Now, that doesn't tend to be the case in terms of where the numbers are trending, right? We're recognizing this is becoming more of a phenomenon, and so it's not an ideal scenario, but that's where we are there. With respect to the second point, and whether or not a district has the ability to modify downward, they would. The district would have an ability to also voluntarily decide to provide their long-term substitute educators health insurance. They've just chosen through their own policies to make sure they didn't, to make sure they had no benefits. And so while we'd love to see that sort of, good, kind, egalitarian nature of how districts move, that's simply not been the case. And so the limited nature of this language to make sure that this specific definition was only applicable for purposes of determining a subsidy, really the reason why it ends up being a little bit distinct is because right now CCSD's policy, for instance, sets it at 15 days. However, it also precludes any sort of benefits associated, and so that sort of preclusion at that point makes that definition somewhat arbitrary. What becomes the benefit outside of a minor and incremental pay bump of you might get $20 more now, or $10 to $20 more now per day because you've been doing it for a period of years, which again is not even sufficient enough to keep up with limited levels of inflation versus anything else. So that's kind of where we ended up landing on that.
Thank you. Thank you for the detailed answer. And the other question has to do with the date of effect that the bill is currently proposed is July 1 of 2023. But then in the amendment number 2, there's a Board of Trustees adopting a procedure. So is that also the plan to try to adopt that procedure with that quick turnaround, or is there going to be a little bit of, let's give you just a little bit more time? Just was wondering about the date of implementation.
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada, the date this would take into effect would obviously be the date that's specified because we want to make sure this goes into effect next year. If we kick it out another year or kick it out 10 months, it would end up being too long. Now, the specific amendment number 2 discusses the procedure to track when it goes into effect. And that tracking becomes critical because, as we know, we come back with data which we attempted to parse through as we were going through the public records requests. And I also enjoy a good Excel sheet here and again. But it's probably not best for purposes of determining some of this. We wanted to make sure it was uniform. So that procedure to track when the subsidy goes into effect could also provide us insightful data next legislative session when we come back and see how do we build on this? Where do we go from here, right? This is the first step in getting to that process. But from our vantage point, you can never have too much data. And so the goal for doing it would be to make sure that that's twofold. Thank you.
And my final question, if I may, I'll make it quick, right? My final question, is a substitute able to possibly be, to also get the district provided insurance and pay for it in that fashion? Or is the intent to have the substitute look outside of the district for their health insurance?
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. If the districts are willing to provide health insurance, we probably wouldn't have been here in the first place, but we recognize that bargaining is in effect in many counties, obviously, statewide, and nothing about this bill should preclude any ability for any of these units to be able to bargain, right? So we didn't want to necessarily impact that right away. So the goal would be here for them to be able to purchase private health insurance through the exchange where it's sufficient. We tried to make sure that as we were constructing this, there was an understanding of what the reality is and what we might like to do. And what we might like to do is have every long-term substitute and every substitute educator have health insurance. But what the reality is that the bureaucratic elements associated with developing such a model to be able to provide upwards of 1,000 individuals statewide with health insurance outside of this model probably wouldn't be sufficient. The other thing to keep in mind is that there might be some long-term substitute educators, at least amongst the ones we've talked to, at least some, who might be covered under a spouse's policy or another individual's policy. And so if that ends up being the case, they may not need to be able to do this. It's why we included the parameters specifically with respect to making sure that the proof of health insurance is provided and it's not for general purpose. So it fills the gap. And again, it continues to drive down any potential notion of a cost associated here, which doesn't really exist in the first place. Thank you.
I just want to put on the record that I gave 3 questions the day before deadline and with a smile on my face. Assemblywoman Hanson.
Good afternoon, brave individuals on the end of a hard week with all of our brain capacity stretched, and really impressed with yours. And I do not take my health insurance for granted. Being self-employed and having catastrophic health insurance because we couldn't afford anything else for such a long time because we had so many dang dependents that, with a $15,000 deductible, I feel the pain. So I'm not a teacher, but do teachers, regular employed full-time district teachers, is their dependents already covered, or they have to buy the coverage for their dependents?
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director of the ACLU of Nevada. My understanding, again, based on the bargaining units, I'm not familiar with every bargaining unit, for instance, in some of our other counties outside of Clark and Washoe. I do know that coverage is provided. There are a slew of issues with respect to the health insurance coverage. My understanding, again, from what I was told, and some of the parameters associated with what some provisions are in terms of eligibility for dependents, eligibility in terms of whether or not you're married and how many folks you're able to cover. Our research indicated that it was 2 dependents and a spouse, but also that there were other elements that were in place in terms of whether or not familial apparatus stays together that would preclude the ability to maintain individuals on their insurance. So our understanding was that there are, with the notion that obviously it may vary depending on what's been bargained for by each unit.
Just a follow-up clarification on what you just said, if that's okay, Chair. So some teachers, some dependents are covered, and then some places they're not. It's not uniform? Is that what you said?
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. The parameters by which coverage is given may differ district to district. So I can give an example and speak plainly. My understanding, and again, this is from conversations we've had, and there's folks on the committee far better equipped to be able to address that than I am at this point. But if individuals are together, for instance, they're married and they have multiple dependents, let's say they have 4 children, if they're become divorced at that point, it may modify the way that that's actually set up, at least in Clark County, in terms of what the apparatus is for how that's provided. And so there is provisions in place from our understanding for dependents to be covered, but it's up to a specific amount and then potentially additional expenditures thereafter. But we're happy to also look into that and get back if there's further information needed, or phone a friend on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we will go to Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. I really do think it is critical. I spent 2 years as a long-term sub before I became a teacher, and I think many of our teachers do that as they are going through their education programs. And I was in college and I didn't realize that I should have these benefits, and I just winged it, but I don't know that that's what everyone should be doing. To answer the previous question, in Washoe, we do have to pay extra for our dependents. I pay $250 a month to add my daughter on. I don't know what everyone else is doing. But here's my question, and I think you touched on this, but I just want to get clarity on the record. So under this proposal, our substitutes would have coverage potentially from September through June. Is that correct? They would not have coverage over the summer?
For the record, Atar Hasibullah, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. Well, it depends obviously on the date of start and when the qualification ends up kicking in. Let's say it's at the beginning of the school year, they end up hitting the 30-day period. It would likely end up taking effect the following month, so October, and it would actually go through, obviously, the period of time for school. But one thing it wouldn't do is the bill doesn't actually provide coverage. It provides the subsidy to obtain coverage. That distinction becomes really clear and really important when we start examining the financials associated with this, and the reality is that our substitute educators are paid per check, and the subsidy would be applied in the same manner. And what would end up happening is if we ended up mandating, the initial consideration was require districts to just provide health insurance. And then we thought about the quality of treatment they've been subject to already and correspond that to the quality of coverage they'd likely be provided if it was left in a discretionary fashion, right? And that becomes very challenging in that regard. So this allows for those individuals, again, to obtain that coverage, and for those that we've spoken to that obtain other summer employment, maintain that policy throughout so that it continues to move forward and be maintained. Our hope would be school districts would recognize, hey, this is a great idea. We're stabilizing our labor force here. We're ensuring that more long-term subs are in place, and so we want to just continue to maintain it, right? That may not end up being the case, which is part of the reason why, to Assemblywoman Anderson's question earlier, we included the data tracking procedures and methodologies associated. So we can come back in 2 years and see what actually happened. We'll have an assessment of what worked and what didn't.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I just have one more. So I really appreciate that, and I am concerned about people having consistent coverage, right? Because that can be an issue with treatment and all kinds of stuff. So I appreciate that you have thought about that. Our long-term subs, we have a crisis in them right now. I have a long-term sub while I'm gone. I'm on my second long-term sub because we have a hard time getting them and keeping them, and some people have a different sub every single day. So I'd like to know, other than the obvious benefits of dignity to work and taking care of people that are doing a critical role, what kind of impact do you think this will have on our sub workforce and actually getting people into these positions in the schools?
Thank you, Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. I think you really speak to the core of the need for this. We cannot expect folks to come and feel the need of dealing with our children with all of their vagaries, trying to function in school districts that are already shorthanded, that are already struggling. We are in flux everywhere in the state, and expect them to show up for 120 days and be happy, oh, so happy, just to get $120 a day, and then have to figure out how they're going to leave the school at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, grade papers, go home, deal with their children, and then figure out how in the world they're going to make it, because for $120 a day, you generally have to have another job. So if that other job is also a part-time job, because now you're working a full-time, you've got to figure out another part-time. This is the reason why we have so much flux. And this is the reason we believe that this is important. How do we give some type of encouragement for people to stick and stay? And this, I think, it brings a modicum of just respect and dignity to the work, that they can say, well, it may not be great, but I've got health insurance and I'll stick it out, right? And then it's up to all of the educators and the schools to then encourage them to go for licensure and to then fill those positions permanently. I know there's a gap in there, and I've talked to many people about that this session, about what are we doing to retain. And this is just a Band-Aid on a very open gash. This is not a solution, but it helps, and I think it will help a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Vice Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a couple of my questions were already taken care of, so that's really a good thing. Just a question, in the research that you've done, you talked a little bit about trends in other states, other districts doing things. Really kind of a two-part. Are there other states that you know of that have put that put this in statute? And then also, why 70% of the days going forward? I'm just interested as to how you landed on that number.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Taylor. For the record, Atara Sibula, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. With respect to other states, really the evaluations we've done have been community to community, district to district, and some of those districts are enormous, right? Large school districts, but it really hasn't been needed to be mandated at the statewide level the same because we haven't really seen impact. Largely, we haven't seen impact in the same way. So those impacts have generally come through in terms of the larger districts being able to provide it. Now, we're attempting to still go through and assess every smaller school district in the country and what that looks like. But one thing we have noticed is that the reliance here in terms of the percentage size on long-term subs pursuant to this expanded definition is pretty significant. And when we had initially a smaller definition, a reduced size definition in terms of what the qualifications would be, obviously that number was significantly higher. Part of the reason why we picked the 70% threshold thereafter was because, again, we spoke to business, we spoke to industry leaders in multiple sectors, and one of the things they were concerned about was what happens if somebody only ends up, they meet the qualification, and then they only end up working 10% of the days thereafter. Why should they be eligible for benefits in the same way? So the reason why we set the 70% threshold is when we started looking at best practices nationally, most of the models ended up including 70% work requirement when we recognized that they're not entitled to the same PTO days and the structure of days in that manner. And so 70% leaves us in a place where they're still working the overwhelming majority of days that are there, but it's not without any level of parameters. So we viewed that compared to what we've seen in other realms as being a happy medium that produces both efficiency but also maintains some level of accountability, so we don't run into scenarios where there's arguments that this was a waste of money because someone worked for 30 days and then they decided not to work the days thereafter. I've also seen statements put out that have said that there's been issues with the fact that the only thing is, they can work every 45 days. We included that 70% threshold specifically for the purposes of precluding that argument. So someone is working 30 days consecutively and 70% of the days thereafter, and they don't go more than 45 days without doing it, and all they're asking for is a health insurance subsidy. It really does put a moral check on this body, and also when it heads next door, hopefully, to be able to assess where we are in terms of valuing our substitute educators and how we're addressing this crisis moving forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Couple more questions, unless somebody else has thought of one. We'll go to Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. And as somebody who owned a business for over 15 years and had to pay for their own health insurance, and then my husband and I both got other jobs that provided health insurance when that became too expensive to pay for our own, I understand having health insurance. So my questions, I just want to kind of touch on what Assemblywoman Anderson was talking about. As far as so if I'm just curious as to who is it on to notify, if is the district or the school going to track, if they haven't worked, the 45 days, so now they're not eligible, or is it the sub telling them that, or in the case of, say they become eligible under another policy, spouse, or maybe they get another job that they can get health insurance, when would they have to tell, the school or the district that I have another policy?
For the record, Atara Sibula, ACLU of Nevada, Assemblywoman Hardy, the parameters that we have put in place provide the construction for what's required of the districts. The implementation of that policy and how they're actually going to go about conforming and complying with the rules is largely going to be left to the districts. Each district obviously functions different in terms of employment communication with the substitute educators within their specific district. I will give probably the only time maybe in my career, a big shout out to Nye County for promptly responding to my public records request, just giving me the number 29 individuals or something along those lines fell within the category, right? But because of that, because we recognize each district is communicating vastly differently with their substitute educators, it'll be up to the districts to adopt those policies. But the main parameters that are put in place is when hopefully when we adopt this law into place and this requirement into place, districts won't have the ability to simply say, oh, well, we didn't do it, because they'd be in technical noncompliance at that point. Their implementation of it, though, largely be left up to them in terms of the specification. The tracking procedures that go into place, the reason why we had that included too, is it provides value in terms of assessing what a rollout looks like of this nature, right? This might end up being applicable in other sectors or other areas at some point in the future. So it could provide valuable data in that regard, but the actual implementation of it, again, comes down to the district, but the requirements that are in place would be set forth by NRS moving forward.
Thank you for that, and we will end with Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman, for bringing this important piece of legislation here, and Mr. Hazibola for helping with this bill. This is addressing a significant workforce issue in our education system, and just had two, questions, really, points of clarification, really. So one, substitutes who are going to be affected by this this new policy, they have to be working consecutively for 30 days. So even if there's a break within the day, would it hamper their eligibility for the subsidy? And number two, what exactly is meant by available instructional days in terms of and why that term is probably important to this bill? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman De Silva, for the question. Atara Sibula, Executive Director of the ACLU of Nevada. The reason, and both questions kind of point to the same factor, is what is the qualifying criteria and why do we use this language? Available instructional days are currently utilized in a variety of sources. To Assemblywoman Torres' point earlier, we have recognized there are vast voids within NRS, right? One of the areas becomes when we look at the definition of long-term substitute, which is referenced throughout NRS, but there is no NRS definition currently of long-term substitute. We didn't want to modify the other section, so we limited it to this. But available instructional days were utilized specifically to be able to carve out what ends up being something we viewed as the potential barrier for individuals to end up qualifying, in that if an instructional day is unavailable, we don't want to preclude an individual from being able to obtain the necessary number of days to be able to qualify for this. And so let's say we run into a scenario magically, and I think most of us would hope we magically run into this scenario, that all of these, our teacher shortage has turned around quickly in a matter of months, and we've now dropped down to single-digit teacher shortage in large school district. And you had somebody that was otherwise eligible before, but now those days have not become available. But 2 weeks later, they are available again, right? Those days haven't been made available. They're not available instructional days. And so at that point, we don't want anyone to be in a position where they've started the process, but their days have not been made available and there's a break. Now, do I think that that's likely to happen? Probably not, but I'm an optimist, and so we can hope for the best, and we are where we are in that regard. But that's the reason why that specific language was utilized.
Thank you. I think we're going to go to testimony, but I just want to confirm one thing. If you could wait one moment. Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll have you sit back and we will go to testimony and support. I think we are someone in Las Vegas who would like to testify in support, if I saw. You can come up and sit down in the chair, press your microphone, and if you would say and spell your name for our committee secretaries, and begin when you're ready.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me up there in Carson. Brandon Summers for the record. I'm a substitute teacher for the Clark County School District. I started subbing in 2016, and at the time I was finishing school while also playing violin at corporate events. It was a nice way to supplement my income as a musician, and it was fulfilling to be of service to young people. Where I lost my spot. Oh, and quite frankly, I wasn't interested in taking on a large commitment in the education field at the time. But I remember getting that phone call in 2018. It was in August. I was minding my business, and it was a call from the assistant principal at Kinnearwood Middle School, and they were looking for a sub-tech on a vacancy position for orchestra. I guess my name had got around from the day-to-day assignments I was covering. Anyway, the story was the orchestra teacher who was in the position in the previous year went back to Ohio and decided not to come back. I was busy at the time with gigs, but I decided to take them up on it. What I didn't know before I got into this position was it was a lot of work. and the pay was low. I also wouldn't have health insurance. Based on the workload, I should have thrown the towel at some point, but I'd grown an attachment to the kids. Most of them had never touched an instrument in their life, and it was an opportunity to make a difference, and a difference I did make. After completing the semester assignment, I vowed never to do this again, but the COVID-19 pandemic said otherwise. As a result of the pandemic, I lost all my work as a freelance musician in an instant. And after being unemployed for 6 months, I took on a year-long commitment for CCSD, once again in a long-term position. I had all the duties and responsibilities of a licensed teacher, but was barely able to pay my rent, and all I could do was pray I didn't get sick, since I didn't have employer-sponsored health insurance. Being a long-term sub is not a part-time position, it's not a babysitting job, and the workday does not end at 3 p.m. School districts are actively engaging in wage theft by underpaying long-term subs, and it is shameful that CCSD is okay with exploiting this part of their workforce. Mind you, we are the only people keeping schools from completely falling apart in light of the national and global teacher shortage. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas that wishing to testify in support? I see someone back there, but I don't see you coming forward. So we'll come to Carson City. Please go ahead when ready.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Evans. I'm the president of the Washoe Education Association, and we represent the certified professionals in the Washoe County School District. I want to say thank you to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong for bringing this bill forward, and also the ACLU of Nevada for championing these efforts. Substitutes play a vital role in the education ecosystem. We here in Washoe County, we had been pushing and advocating tremendously with our superintendent, our school district, to provide better supports for our substitute teachers, and recently had increases to sub pay made. And that's because even though they don't fall within our bargaining unit, they play a significant role in supporting the students in our schools. And they also play a significant role in supporting the current educators that we do have in the classroom. Anybody who has taught understands the impact of not being able to find a sub, and when we cannot fill positions, the burden and load that places on the rest of the adults in the building. When we talked about how to fund this, and I know it's already been discussed around accrued savings, in Washoe County we were very aggressive going after those accrued savings, and we're able to use those funds to provide additional compensation for educators over a certain caseload. What's great is this bill would not even impact those efforts, because we were using the salary savings portion. There is still the benefits, the insurance and benefits cost that the districts are still saving due to having so many unfilled positions. So the money is there to fund these efforts. And then finally, if we think about when you talk to a retired teacher, and they play, again, an extremely important role, one of the biggest issues that comes up with them when they retire is their ability to afford insurance. And so we have a number of highly qualified retired teachers in our school districts who would come back, and providing these supports for insurance would also address one of the major issues that comes up when you talk to retirees. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, in support of AB 282 as well. We submitted comments. I won't read them, but I do want to mention that there is a bit of a companion bill over on the Senate side, SB 434, which would make long-term substitutes also eligible for retirement benefits. We support that bill as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Seline, S-E-L-I-N-E, and I'm testifying on behalf of myself. I'm a substitute teacher, Churchill County School District. I personally don't like to do long-term jobs. I have in the past, and I can tell you that the workload is the same as what a teacher would do as far as lesson plans, grading, talking to parents, going to meetings, all of that, but you get none of the benefits. No vacation pay, no PERS, nothing. So I think it would help a lot to have more people willing to do long-term if they have at least health insurance. Normally, I would not be in favor of ever spending more money. I like to spend less, but I think in this case it would be helpful There's such a shortage of substitutes in all the school districts. I think it's a small investment to make sure that these classes are covered. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else in here to make comments in support, testimony in support? Okay, with that, we'll go to the phone lines. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to offer support testimony?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of AB 282, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. One moment, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits 402, please press star 6 to unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Schuman, S-H-U-M-A-N, and I am here in favor of the amendment to AB 282. I came into the Clark County School District as a substitute. For 2 years, we were not afforded any type of benefit, not any sick leave, vacation, or insurance. Within 2 years, CCSD formed the position of PST, Permanent Substitute Teacher. 100 substitutes, including myself, were now afforded sick leave, vacation, and insurance. This program ended up being eliminated after 2 years. To this day, my colleague and I still go before our school board of trustees presenting it, suggesting that our substitutes be able to partake in that again. Um, 2 years ago, I was put into a classroom with a long-term sub. This substitute teacher was superb. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, she and her husband both came down with COVID. Nobody needed insurance more than they did. In fact, she was even better than the teacher, the full-time teacher that they put into the class the next year. Our substitutes deserve, and we need to respect them in the job that they do by presenting them with insurance, if not vacation and sick leave as well. I ask and pray that the amendment to AB 282 be granted and that our subs deserve it and they work hard enough to get it. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. BPS, any other phone calls in support testimony?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Anna Binder, A-N-N-A-B-I-N-D-E-R. I'm calling in support of this bill, and I do very much thank the ACLU for spearheading this, and I appreciate all of the questions and the discussions. I am just a mom, but I appreciate every single person who is willing to walk into one of our schools and support our children. And this is absolutely a way to let these long-term subs know that we do value them. And I think it says a lot about our district that the ACLU has spearheaded this and not the districts themselves. But regardless, it's very much appreciated. And I hopefully look forward to seeing this come to fruition for the benefit of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. BPS, is there any more callers?
Chair, there are no more callers choosing to provide support testimony at this.
Thank you. And with that, we will close support and open opposition. Anyone in Las Vegas? Not seeing anyone. I see someone coming up to CCSD. Are you coming up? No. I actually, that's good because I was going to call you up because we just received the document that you sent us about your current policy. And I think actually we might have a few questions on that. So why don't you start out by telling us what the document was so it's clear. I think members are just taking a look at it right now, but suffice it to say, it looks like CCSD does have a policy offering healthcare for long-term subs. So if you could be as specific as possible when you talk about who those people are and what is covered. Thank you.
Yes, Patricia Haddad, Director of Government Relations for Clark County School District. I will do my best to explain and get into the details as much as I can, and if there are questions that I can't answer right now, I'm happy to follow up. So, the document that you have in front of you is essentially it's a letter that was sent to all eligible substitutes and temporary employees in December of last year. This went out to 610 individuals for to be able to enroll in health insurance. And so it lays out a couple of things. It lays out how they can go about with the open enrollment, as well as their sort of summary of benefits. That speaks to sort of what all is covered. And let me see, I've got too many tabs open here. There it is. What all is covered and what their copays might be depending upon the situation, as well as pay period deductions. So I just wanted you guys to see that and know that that is something that occurs. And the folks that are eligible for that, so this is a little complicated, but essentially, excuse me, so substitute teachers and temporary employees who work an average of 29 and a half hours per week over the course of a year are eligible to enroll in this plan, the CCSD, this HMO plan, in the following calendar year. And so throughout that calendar year, sorry, I'm looking at multiple things right now. So you're able to enroll through the open enrollment, or if you have, right, like an eligible major life event, you have a baby or something to that effect. And then the amount of hours that you work throughout that year that you are eligible or are receiving those benefits, it doesn't matter sort of what hours you work, or if you continue to meet that 29 and a half hour per week threshold, you'll continue to be covered. But the subsequent year, in order to continue coverage on that third year, you would need to continue to maintain in that previous year that 29 and a half hours per week throughout the entire year. So that's what, and so that letter is in regards to the coverage for those folks.
Somebody's alarm's going off. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Do you need to leave? Okay. Get a lot of giggles today. Okay, so let me just go through this in my head because we just got this. So it really does nothing for substitutes who have just started this year. So it has to be the subsequent year. 29, did you say 29.9?
Patricia Haddad, 29.5, and I believe it gets rounded up to 30. Or
Okay.
somewhere in
That seems like a lot, right? Every week? I mean, right? I mean, I'm just guessing, but okay, so 29 rounds up to 30 has to be, it's for next year. So if I'm doing it, I have to do it this year, then I find out. Is this something that people are aware of? Because I know that I've got emails about this and nobody's saying, can't wait till next year where I'm going to receive these benefits. I mean, do they know that, and are they aware of the 29.5? How is that information getting out?
Patricia Haddad, Director of Government Relations for Clark County School District. I don't know the specifics on how that information gets relayed to folks that are substitutes or who are on a pathway forward. What I do know is on an annual basis, we look back to look at all substitute and temporary employees to see who met that eligibility, and then reach out to them and give them the opportunity to enroll. And I will say, out of the 610 folks that were eligible and received the information last year, we had 57 out of those who chose to enroll in the plan.
Okay, and then on the slide, I think the slide had an indication that this would cover over 3,000. So currently, you're offering this to 600 and some odd, 57 are taking it. Is it the aggregated of 29.5? So if I work almost every week that I'm eligible, but I get COVID and I'm out for 2 weeks, is that is it an average, or how is that figured?
So I believe that it's 29.5 over a 37-week period. It's looking at August to August, and it has to be maintained in order to meet that eligibility. But let me find out if, I don't know how you would double up on a particular week then to say if you missed one, right? Because there are limited hours that school is in session.
Right. So kind of some big hoops to jump through. Did we, members, do you guys have other questions? I know that we just got this information, so. Just one?
And it might be similar. So how many hours are in a day that are credited to the substitutes? Because do they also get credited for a lunchtime? And or if they were to work a full day, I know in high school many times there's a prep, but many times those same subs then get pulled over. So do they also get credited for that lunch hour or other time frame?
Patricia Haddad, I do not want to give you the wrong information, but I will find out and get back to you.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for answering our questions. So yeah, I'm just looking at this, and I gotta say, those are pretty nice benefits for the price right there. Explain to me again, because I was looking, and I apologize, you might have said this. It was dated that this just is a current thing that has started at CCSD. It's a December 2022. Like, what's the history? Has it been there for a while? And this is just the yearly, hey, you qualified for enrollment. And then could you state for me again what the hour cap was? Like, you might have said that.
Thank you, Patricia Haddad. So how long this particular model has been in place, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out. And then this letter is from December of 2022, and this is what specifically went out to the folks that were eligible.
You are in the meeting now.
So many noises. So that was the letter that went out to folks that were eligible in December of this past year for benefits to kick in January. And then the second part of your question was, 29 and a half, 30 hours per week.
Thank you so much.
And once again, I'm doing some quick math because I believe most substitutes work about 6 hours a day. So that would be, they're working full-time, 5 days a week. So it's basically a full-time gig, you would be eligible. Okay. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I think I definitely have some concerns. I think this is actually making the case for why we might need this bill. So I'm concerned, one, there's 610 eligible and only 57 signed up. I'm wondering if there's some communication issues, so I'd love some follow-up on how that information is getting out. Secondly, can you just speak to how often you have a sub that comes back? Because I know a lot of times we'll have a sub that's with us a year, and then our goal is for them the next year to be an actual teacher. For them to have to work an entire year before they qualify for benefits seems pretty extreme, even compared to other industries. So if you can just speak to why a full year is required instead of the month that most other industries are requiring.
Patricia Haddad, yes. So the rationale and the backstory for a year and the 12-month look back, I would have to get back to you on that specifically, 12 months and why that policy was put into place. And I will be sure to get back to you with information on the initial communication as well as who continues coverage out of those folks that opt into it year over year.
Okay, thank you. I think you're going to be off the hot seat for a minute. Would you guys like to start testimony? You can go second if you want.
Yeah, Patricia Haddad, I would love to get off of this table right now. Also, just want to say, worked with Atar on education policy work in another life, and not the person that I want to be toe-to-toe against in any sort of policy matter. But, I mean, here's the thing, is we would love to support this bill, obviously, and of course, substitutes are an integral part of the district's day-to-day operations and support of kids. And I do want to note that I appreciate the attention to detail and the thoughtful nuance in the amendment. But unfortunately, as it's currently written, regretfully in opposition due to the administrative challenges that it presents. I won't go into the rehash some of these pieces, but of course, as noted, substitute teachers and temporary employees who do meet that threshold are eligible to enroll in that plan. And the reason that I sent that was because there were some comments made about that I had sent that during the committee meeting, was because there had been some comments about not there being no health insurance available, and I just wanted to note that there is indeed, recognizing the limitations that exist on it. So I will also add, in our initial reading of the BDR, we thought that it was a $450, the $450 subsidy would only apply to the substitute. However, understanding that that's actually a fourfold increase from our initial estimate, based on the fact that it would be 450 times the substitute plus up to 3 dependents. That's more than double the most expensive contribution for a full-time employee. In addition to that, moving from a 12-month look back to a 30-day look back, as outlined in the bill, would require an immense amount of additional staffing and management resources to keep up with the month-to-month changes in enrollment eligibility. Continue to be heartened by legislation to support teacher pipeline pathways to facilitate that process and lessen financial barriers to becoming a full-time licensed educator, and of course want to continue to support our substitute teachers. I will also just note on the vacancy dollars, so those sit at the for Clark County, and specifically based on AB 469, based on the reorg, right? So those school budgets and those vacancy dollars sit at the school level, so we wouldn't be able to offset those costs at the district level or at the central office level to cover the subsidy. So I just wanted to note that as well. And thank you so much.
And I know you guys have been sitting there a long time, but I do have to give my members and the audience a little lay of the land. We are 5 minutes from 4 o'clock, where we are losing a big number of, we're losing, I think, 4 members of the committee and the bill presenter. And we're not losing them. No, we know where they're at. Yeah. She said McCarthy might be lost. Oh, I didn't even say it. MacArthur. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and go. I think it's just you two that are, and then as soon as I can, are you okay with you if you leave it hard to make any closing statements? Okay, so after this bill, you guys, we're gonna have to recess and come back. I know you don't. Well, and we need to have a discussion because we do have the permission to work session this bill if we have the votes. So that's what's happening. Okay? All right. So go ahead and we're on opposition. Okay. Whoever has to leave can leave at 4 o'clock, and just know that we'll be recessing and we may be coming back. Okay? She can't wait. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Brzezinski.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'll talk very quickly. First of all, I want to thank the Assemblywoman for meeting with me. She was so gracious, and I really appreciated that as we talked about this bill. There are a couple of concerns, obviously. I mean, I think all of us who've taught, we probably started out as substitute teachers, and that is not an easy job. So we certainly appreciate substitute teachers, and they do a tremendous amount of work. There's no question about that. The concerns that the folks I work with, and I do represent Nevada Association of School Superintendents, Section 1, Sub 3, where it talks about the additional 3 people that can receive the subsidy. That is something that teachers, permanent teachers really don't have. They can buy insurance for their dependents, but it comes out of their own pocket. They don't get any subsidy for that. The second thing is the language, and I think that Assemblywoman Torres brought that up. We'd like some clarification on that. And I know it's a policy committee, but we can't ignore the fact it is an unfunded mandate, so thank you.
I will make this quite quick, but Tess Opferman here on behalf of the Washoe County School District. We echo the points that have already been brought up. I will say we love our subs, we care about our subs, we depend on our subs, but the fact of the matter is we have a limited amount of funding at the Washoe County School District, and we are working very, very hard to divide up that number to make sure our staff and our teachers get adequate salaries, to make sure we have appropriate mental health services and wraparound services. So a lot of burden is put on school districts to make sure that we're allocating our funding appropriately. We do consider this, unfortunately, an unfunded mandate as much as we depend on our subs. I will also just quickly make a note about the fiscal note. So our fiscal note was also based on the idea that it would be $450 per substitute teacher, not including those dependents. So I do think our fiscal note is significantly higher than what is stated in the represented fiscal note. I know that you're not the money committee, and this will likely go to, or could go to Ways and Means, but I want to flag that for all of you so that you have an idea of what our fiscal note could be moving forward. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room in opposition? Not seeing anyone. BPS, phone lines open. Opposition?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we will go to neutral. Anyone neutral? Neutral. BPS, anyone on the phone lines in neutral?
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Okay, with that, I'll invite the bill sponsors back up to make any closing comments. Thank you.
For the record, Atara Sibulu, Executive Director for the ACLU of Nevada. As predicted, I knew I was going to hear my two favorite words, unfunded mandate, and I knew, as I mentioned, accrued savings, right, and budgeted for expenses are the retort to that. These are not unfunded mandates. You funded them time and time again. They haven't filled the positions. I appreciate, CCSD. I was aware of part of this policy. We actually included it as an exhibit, and I think to Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch's point, the fact that 57 individuals got on a plan, and we have how many thousands of substitutes within a district, really shows a poor recruitment strategy. Imagine a recruitment strategy where you got to work for a year to get health insurance. You can go to any retail operation right now and get it after 30 days. You can go to any business and get it after 30 days. To work for a year and determine eligibility a year later is pretty jarring. I mean, 57 people probably enrolled because by the time they're done with that, and we don't have access to that information, obviously that's going to be protected through HIPAA, but probably about a year later, I'd imagine that might be the last batch of folks left. Right? That might be all you have left. And if we continue to do this, thousands of individuals at a time, we're going to have no substitute teachers left. So appreciate the comments. And obviously I recognize, it puts folks in a tough spot because this is a challenging space to be in. So very much appreciate that. But we really need to resolve this now. It can't be something that's kicked over. And even if we get sent to Ways and Means, it's going to be the same argument back. If anybody can justify the fact that we're saving upwards between $30,000 to $50,000 by filling these gaps with long-term subs and not treating them with basic dignity and decency, I'd be happy to listen to it, but I don't think the math or the data shows that that's actually the case. So we appreciate this committee's time. I do hope you work session this. If there is any information in between time or any amendments to come in, we're happy to consider those as well. But that is our position today, and we are grateful for you taking time on this deadline eve to be able to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We appreciate your time here. I just want to address one thing. The comment that this will take additional staff to track this, I just want to say that I call that a little bit disingenuous. There is a tracking software already in place. They know how many days substitutes have taught. They know how many openings are available. They even said in the presentation that they are tracking in order to be able to find out if a substitute has worked enough days for a whole year to get insurance the following year. The mechanism is in place. Let's do the right thing. I think that what we've heard today from you and your bill presentations and your work session is that you believe in our schools and that they're a necessity in our communities. And we cannot say that we love our kids and we want the best for our kids, but we will not do something to ensure that the people who are providing the education that we say we want our children to have cannot even go to the doctor and are afraid for any illness that could put them on the street, homeless, because that is the number one reasons why people end up in homelessness, trying to balance their budgets. So I thank you so much for your time, appreciate you, and I'm about to run to revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will close the hearing on AB 282. She's just mumbling over there. I have no idea what she's saying. I know. It's like,
Is that a possibility to work session it right now?
1 minute recess. Everybody come over here. Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, members, as you know, per Assembly Standing Rule 57, Section 4, there's a waiting period that prohibits a committee from taking action on a measure within the 24 hours immediately after the hearing. We have received permission from Speaker Yeager to waive that 24-hour rule. As such, I will now entertain, well, do you say it now? No, you are going to explain the motion, the amendment after? Or do I, no, I take a motion.
I can say it.
Okay, so we're going to hear what the bill is, what the work session is, and we have two amendments. And then we'll take a motion.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Drozdoff, Committee Policy Analyst. For the record, my understanding is that the committee is considering the bill with the proposed amendment with the following change: replacing long-term substitute with full-time substitute, explaining that a school district or school may not prevent any substitute teacher from working the necessary number of days to qualify for a subsidy specified within Amendment 4 for the purposes of precluding his or her ability to qualify for that subsidy, and this will be inclusive of reassigning the teacher's duties to another position within the school, for example, paraprofessionals or teacher's aides, and taking out the dependents section of the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions? Assemblywoman Torres.
Clarifying point, we're also accepting the amendment that was introduced by the sponsor today, correct?
She said she thinks she said that. I'm not sure you did. Did you? Okay, that is the intent. Yes, we're including that as well. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I would take a motion to amend and new pass.
So moved.
Assemblywoman Anderson has made the motion. Do I have a second? Second from Vice Chair Taylor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Raise your hand. We've got two nays, Hanson and Hardy. With that, motion carries. Congratulations. I will assign that to you. And that was Summers Armstrong. You. Okay. Thank you, members who have to skedaddle out of here. We are going to go to our, boy, you just did not want to come back. I appreciate it. Okay. So now we will move on to our final agenda item, which is public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and can submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. Each person is given 2 minutes. For the record, please remember to say and spell your name. With that, is there anybody wishing to make public comment here in Carson City? No? Anyone in Las Vegas behind the pole? Anyone on the phone wishing to make public comment?
Callers, if you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. One moment, Chair.
Good afternoon, Anna Binder again for the record. I just really wanted to, again, say thanks and show as much appreciation as I could, and thank this committee for always trying to do what's absolutely right, as best as you guys can find it. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Always nice to end with a compliment, unless there's another call. BPS, anyone else?
Chair, there are no more callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Great. Okay, so we currently have an agenda posted for our meeting tomorrow at the call of the chair. So if there's any final business that the committee needs to conduct on deadline day, we do have that agenda. At this time, that it's not my intention to have the committee meet, but there's a possibility we will, so an agenda has been posted. I'll make sure that I keep members informed of our plans. It's not intended to surprise anyone. So that concludes our meeting for today, and this meeting is adjourned.